I failed a test for the first time in grade 5. It was geography. I put China in Europe and Europe in South America and everything else somewhere wrong. Apparently, I had never seen a map of the world before. I was known as a sort of goody two-shoes nerd type, and I'd never had to study for anything before. This was the beginning of my realization that you can't coast through life just because you read a lot of books. The failed test crushed me. I refused to talk to anyone at recess, and instead I retreated to a corner of the concrete courtyard no one ever went to. I paced in circles, contemplating the empty roads of my future. I had failed, I was a failure, and there was no hope for me. I planned on running away and starting my life over in a place where no one knew that I had failed a grade 5 geography test. The next time I failed a test was in grade 9 math. When my teacher placed the paper on my desk and I saw the score, I quickly grabbed it, trying to throw it into my binder before anyone could see. My teacher saw this and, standing in front of the class, said, "Megan, I see you trying to hide your grade. Maybe if you worked harder, you wouldn't have these failures to hide." This was devastating, but also rude enough that a lot of the kids in the class seemed to side with me in feeling that it was unnecessary for her to say that. And at the time, I had been searching for a new identity. The smart kid thing, which was my identity in elementary school, hadn't really panned out. In high school, I did poorly in some subjects and perfectly fine in others, but you have to be good at almost everything to carry the smart kid label, and I was not. So I gave myself a new label, Village Idiot. I may fail my math and science tests, but I'll joke about it, and I'll have funny stories to tell about teachers saying kind of rude things to me. Isn't it funny how stupid I am? I failed my whole math class in grade 10, and even worse than regular math, it was French math. That meant I had 2 credits to make up for, a math credit and a French credit. I could retake the class the next year as a grade 11 student in a grade 10 class, or I could take it in English online. I opted for online, so then I had 2 classes, English math and the French online course they throw in there for idiots like me to make up their lost French credit. The class was called Tourisme. It was about tourism. I finished tourism at 5 in the morning, exactly 3 hours before my grade 12 year ended. I was graduating with the minimum number of credits needed, and this was my very last one. Without it, I would have failed high school. My French teacher stayed up with me on the other side of a computer somewhere across the city, grading my assignments as they came in throughout the night and early into the morning, just so I could graduate. He was the one who had failed me in grade 10 math, and he also, in the end, was the reason that I was able to graduate high school. Part of the reason I came so close to not graduating high school was feeling like I was stupid and therefore acting as such. Part of the reason was bitterness over feeling like the things that I cared about didn't matter. Part of it was constantly feeling overwhelmed by how long it took me to do stuff that was seemingly easy for other people, and part of it was just overwhelming depression due to tragic events from my youth that I didn't know how to deal with and remained an active part of my life. But way back in the first day of grade 9, I had hope. Like many people, I'm sure, I thought it could be a new beginning, and I couldn't wait for recess. I was so excited to run around and explore the outdoors. I did think it was odd that all we had was a massive field and some trees. I wasn't sure what a whole high school was supposed to do just standing outside in the field, but I figured we could make do and play freeze tag or Red Rover. As the day went on, the buzzer would sound every hour or so, signaling 5 frantic minutes to make it to your next class. I kept waiting for the announcement that it was recess time, but the day ended and it never came. I realized you don't get recess in high school. That might come off as me being immature or stupid, but let me show you my thought process. So you're a teenager, you're 14 to 18 years old. These are some of the years where you are going to have the most physical energy in your life. But what do you get for those years? You get having to stay inside, sitting down, and being force-fed massive amounts of constant information on so many different subjects, and you're expected to remember all of it, be good at all of it, and try hard at all of it. It doesn't matter that every person learns differently, it doesn't matter that people are passionate about different things, it doesn't matter who you are or what you love, or the fact that movement is necessary for the maintenance of physical and mental health. What matters is uniformity, sameness, and submission. And what is so different between being 13 and being in elementary school and being 14 and being in high school, where at the first age you are allowed outside 3 times a day to play, be creative, and feel the sun on your face, and only 1 year up, you suddenly get no outside time and are kept inside during so many beautiful points of the day. I want to feel the crisp morning air and watch the sky change color. I want to feel warmth coursing through my body while the sun is at its apex. And then I want to feel the relief of the coolness of the afternoon and the way things seem to slow down as the sun dips lower into the sky. And I know these are things that we can't have because humans have to work. But do you have to take that away from children at such a young age? I would have even taken a blizzard, even the dead of winter when the sky is never blue. I don't care. Give me anything. I would rather stand outside with the wind whipping my face and snow stinging against my skin and feeling alive instead of stuck in a dry, dark room, fluorescent lights overhead, my brain completely spent after a day of being just 14 years old, when my mind should be fresh and new and full of energy and creative power, and yet having to force it to bend into learning about things that I hate for hours on end, day in and day out, forgetting what it's like to have fun, to play, to create, to feel passion for something, forcing all of that deep, deep down into my stomach so that it will stop hurting me by trying to get out. Something that I did learn in high school was how to hate myself for not being good enough at high school, and I learned that the things that I care about don't matter. I learned that staring out the window and daydreaming about exploring outside was a punishable offense. I learned the things that I am passionate about don't get you a career, so it's best to forget about them. I learned that doodling during class was a crime for some reason. And as the years went on and I became more disheartened and more certain that the person I am is not someone who could ever succeed, I started skipping class, but not to do anything cool. I'd walk to the nearest library and read books about Scotland. I'd take my bike, go down to the river and sit on the train bridge, writing in a notebook, very dramatic. I'd take naps anywhere I could, the couch upstairs in the library, the bench inside the girls' change room, the pews in the church which was connected to the school. And by the time the 2 later classes of the day rolled around, my body would be screaming out for movement. Even if I walked somewhere for lunch, went outside for lunch, having to come back and sit felt like psychological torture. So I'd just leave and go for a walk around the school halls. Sometimes I'd go down into the cafeteria and line up all the chairs as perfectly evenly as I could. I just thought that was fun. I liked wandering around by myself. I loved writing, taking photos and videos, decorating and making little crafts. A lot of the reasons why I skipped or was late to school was because I chose to stay up late doing those things instead. In grade 12, I was called into the principal's office and told I would fail the year if I didn't shape up. So I did. I skipped less, I tried really hard to be on time, and I studied harder. I felt proud of my efforts, and a while later I was called to the principal's office again, and I was actually so proud that I was certain that this was to congratulate me. I sat in the chair across from the principal, and she turned around her computer and said, "Do you see all this red?" And I still didn't clue in at that point. I have synesthesia, which for me means I see color in things like letters, numbers, or sounds. I thought maybe she was asking me about the color red because she knew I had synesthesia somehow and was taking an interest in me as a person. Little egotistic, maybe looking back to think like that, and it obviously wasn't the case. I don't really know why I thought she would ask me that. It's just that I had been trying so hard and I thought I was doing so well that I was so certain I was here for something good. But of course what the color red meant was bad. Red is bad, my chart was bad, I am bad. I was shocked and a little heartbroken. To try so hard and be told not only are you still a failure, but you are perhaps even more of a failure, did not feel good. I had a very strict set of rules to follow in order to graduate. I needed to not skip any more, like no leeway, but I did just one last time that same day because she said that the rules started tomorrow. It was like a half an hour run to get home, but I ran home crying the whole way. I got inside and collapsed like a Disney princess, arms folded over the living room table, sobbing. My dad came home because he was working as a journalist in charge of the morning news show. His day started at 4 a.m. and ended in the early afternoon. He found me crying. I was embarrassed. He asked what was wrong, and I told him I was a failure. He stood there for a while, not knowing what to do in an awkward dad sort of way, but then he patted my shoulder, said, "Of course you're not a failure," and asked me if I wanted a grilled cheese. It was probably the best thing anyone could have said to me. I ate the grilled cheese with tears running down my face, spent the rest of the day mourning what I thought had been my best effort, and then I finished grade 12 with as much effort as I could muster, pulling through at the final hour. I didn't have university plans. We'd gone to the university at some point in grade 12 for their open house. I began the day feeling closed off, thinking the last thing I wanted to do after high school was submit myself to the horrors of the school system yet again. But then I had a pretty nice day. I learned about something called anthropology, which I thought sounded pretty cool. It was about history and research and people, and I like history and research and people. I thought, I think I might be able to do that. Maybe I'm not a total loss after all. At the end of the day, I was standing around campus with one of my friend groups, and we were talking about the grades that we would need to get into the various programs we saw. My one friend joked, "Not that any of this matters for Megan, she couldn't get into anything if she tried." And everyone laughed. And to be fair, comments like that were kind of my fault. I was constantly making fun of myself. I was the one who decided that I was the village idiot, did it to myself. But I did not end up going to university. For years, I told everyone I'd rather die than submit myself to the education system ever again. And it wasn't like that one comment that kept me from university. It was a combination of my hatred for the school system and my conviction that it was anti-human, objectively wrong, and a money-grubbing corporate machine, and the 4 years that I had spent constantly failing at the things that I tried really hard at. The lesson seemed clear: I'm not good enough. So instead, I got 2 entry-level jobs, working at a chocolate shop and working at a Safeway Starbucks. Very thrilling. And while living with my parents, I saved up enough money for my dream, which was going to Scotland. I was there for about 2 months. My dad came with me for the first 5 days, and then I was alone for about 3 weeks, and then one of my best friends joined me for the second month. And it was one of the best times of my life. But after that, I moved out of home and got more entry-level jobs. I spent the next 6 years living paycheck to paycheck in a total of 6 different homes with 7 different roommates. I got addicted to alcohol and drugs at some point, and then I got sober later on. Obviously, both addiction and getting sober were wild and difficult times in my life. But they're just not what I'm talking about today. They are simply part of the road that led me here. So I'm just gonna breeze right past that. And after sobriety, I found the best job that I'd ever had. It was in the kitchen of a cafe, and during the time that I worked, the whole kitchen was mine. I was in charge of my day and my tasks. Every day I would be the first person in at 5 in the morning, and I'd start up the oven, the hum of it being the only sound in the still, quiet cafe. I had a whole hour to myself before the next person came in. I'd check the sandwich and pastry cases and make a list of everything that needed to be made. The warmth of the oven and the smell of baking would surround me as I drank my morning coffee, and then I would spend the rest of my day going through the list as quickly and efficiently as I could. And this job was great for me because I loved how structured and organized and the same every day was. But the key point is, I loved that I was the one who structured and organized and made my days similar. And I loved the giant windows covering the whole outside wall that I could stare out as I worked, watching the sunrise while making sandwiches with no one getting mad at me about staring out the windows. I loved being able to chat with my coworkers, but still be in my own space and do my own thing. And I loved that my managers trusted me. I loved that I was trusted enough to go outside for a cigarette break when it felt appropriate. And I loved smoking because I loved having a reason to go outside, sit on a bench, and stare up at the sky. I loved the freedom of being in charge of myself and in charge of my time. But even though the job was very good for me, over the years I did begin to yearn for something else. The 5 a.m. mornings were getting really tiring. The last year that I was there, I was also living and taking care of my older brother who has a brain injury. I was taking care of him 4 days a week, and then I was volunteering at my church every Wednesday and making food every week for my younger brother in exchange for him buying me a laptop. So it was super busy, and I barely had time to see my friends, let alone create anything, and I love creating things. And as maybe egotistic as this is, I also wanted praise. I did feel as if no one was proud of me for working at the cafe. I liked working at the cafe. I thought it was a nice job, and I think it's cool working at cafes. I get excited when people tell me they work at a cafe. So it sucks to admit this, but I still wanted the people who don't feel that way to be impressed with me. I, at that point in my life, knew lots of people who had finished degrees or programs and who had careers. And it wasn't something I'd ever really considered for myself, but all of a sudden I wanted to be one of them. I wanted to feel like I mattered when someone asked me, "So what do you do?" And so I decided, after battling voraciously against it for years, that I would go back to school. I chose a 2-year journalism program in the next province over, a 7-hour drive from where I lived, And my dad, who is a journalist, had told me when I was 16 years old to never go into journalism because the industry was dying and I would never get a job because there would be no jobs. But then, when I finally decided that I wanted to go to post-secondary, he was the one who suggested journalism to me on the basis that I like talking to people, writing, and taking photos. And I was like, pardon me? You are the one who told me very seriously not to do that. And he said, well, the industry is evolving in ways that I didn't foresee back then. And he was like, it's still dying, but not fully. There are not many jobs, but there are some. And if you want to write, it's probably your best bet. And I agreed with him on all of that, but also, like, it just felt right. As soon as he suggested journalism, I was like, oh, of course, that makes perfect sense. Of course it's journalism, always has been. And so after moving into my new place in the new city the day before my program began, I took the train to school in order to figure out where my classes were, and it was a dreary, brown, rainy day. I remember standing outside at the base of a large flight of stairs, looking up at the massive school doors drenched with rain, panicking, telling myself, like, okay, Megan, here it is. You're back in the school system, which you hate, but this time it's intentional. You chose this, you know how to work hard now, and you're going to work hard, and it'll be okay. But I was so scared. Interestingly enough, my biggest fear was actually that I would have no friends and that everyone would hate me. I was also afraid of failing everything, but that was actually secondary to my fear of being hated for some reason. And then, surprise of all surprises, it was actually awesome. I had, like, the best time ever in school. All the things that I've always loved, that I was made to think were less than, were the things that mattered here. And the people that taught us about them cared about them, they were passionate, they believed their craft mattered. For school and for homework, I got to spend 2 years being as curious and creative as I've ever wanted to be. I got to take photos, learn what all the buttons on the camera mean, learn how to edit, how to shoot video, how to use a flash and record audio, how to interview well, research, ask open-ended questions. I got to read and learn about everything under the sun because journalism encompasses everything. I got to learn graphic design and Photoshop and how to write better and how to write something persuasive or personal or factual or funny. And I could not believe that the journalism program was just all these things that I already loved wrapped into one course. And they let us go outside sometimes on purpose. I had a feeling of pure golden joy radiate through my entire being when in our first week my photo prof said to us, like, okay, now go run around outside and take photos. Just get familiar with your camera. And I was like, what? You're telling me that I get to do that for class? That's just what I do for fun. I go on photo taking walks for fun. I've been doing that since I was like 12 years old, and now I get to do that as an assignment? So I went outside with my wonderful new friends into the gorgeous autumn sunshine and took photos of golden leaves and beautiful buildings and studying students, and I could not believe how lucky I was. And the craziest thing of all is that I was good at it. I got high grades, 3 scholarships, a paid educational trip to Costa Rica over my first February break, and I graduated with honors. And despite being someone who previously had been very outspoken about the grading system being an idiotic way to determine someone's intelligence, as soon as I found out that I could be good at school, I folded immediately. There was no in between. The high of that first 100% was a drug that I fully immersed myself in. And so as soon as I found out that I was good at it, my grades and my performance in school became the measure of my self-worth. I pushed myself harder with every assignment and received lots of positive feedback. People said nice things to me about my skills and my future. But when someone would ask what I wanted to do after school, to do with my future, I would always say one of 2 non-committal things. I would say either like, well, I like writing, so anywhere that pays me to write, I'll be happy. Or I would say, so many places need someone to tell their story, whether through writing, photography, videography, or social media. Surely I'll find something. But I never gave a definitive. I could never concretely pin down something specific that I wanted. Our last month of school was spent doing a workplace practicum, and I loved my practicum. It was at an independent journalism outlet, and they did what they called slow journalism, which meant instead of like the daily news grind, they dug deep into stories. and pulled out long, thoroughly researched articles and podcasts that covered like every angle of a topic. They also did a bunch of extra stuff like using a printing press, organizing community discussion nights, and hosting a quote-unquote garage sale where people could come in and use the printing press or the button maker, buy merch if they wanted, or just come and hang out, talk with the community. It was a really great place, and I loved my time there. But one day my practicum boss was talking to me about a job opportunity that had opened up back in my home city where I'd be living again very soon, and he offered to be my reference. This was obviously super kind of him, and I really appreciated it, but when he asked if I would apply to the job, I immediately said no. Just like, no thoughts, immediate no. And when he asked why not, I didn't really have an answer. Everything in me just said no. And it turns out that I'd spent 2 years giving vague answers to the question, what will you do after graduation? Because the real answer was, I didn't want any of it. Given that I enjoyed pretty much all aspects of the journalism program, or honestly, like all aspects, I should have been super interested in every job that was talked about, but my only real answer, and the answer I sort of felt wasn't allowed to exist, was, I don't want any of it, I want to do my own thing. Part of the reason I love school so much was that we chose the topic of every one of our assignments, and I loved that freedom. And I also loved the time that we had to put something together, like this job that he was talking to me about. It was daily journalism, and I really respect the value of daily journalism. I feel sometimes like I am less of a journalist myself and more of maybe like journalism's greatest fan. I grew up watching my dad be a daily journalist, and I have so much respect and admiration for that. But a lot of what I personally love about journalism from myself is like the beauty of it, the beauty of being able to format a really intricate story through like writing but also visual mediums. And it just takes longer to create that type of journalism than it does to do daily journalism, which is where the majority of the jobs would be at. And I just don't think I can do it. I loved that freedom, but I didn't know how to say that because I feel like often the world's answer to that is like, well, you can't do that. You don't get freedom. That's not the real world. People need to work in order to support themselves, and like I'm no exception. And therefore like freedom and self-expression are secondary to that. But even with these thoughts starting to form in my mind, I still told myself that I'd look for a job when I graduated and moved back home. I think it was just that thing that I'm pretty sure everyone does, where you like push a task to your future self. And, I just assumed I would be a better and more acceptable version than my current self through some like magical process that has never worked, but I keep thinking that maybe one day it will bear fruit. And when I graduated and moved back home, it was also time to plan my wedding. I had gotten engaged over my last winter break, right before my last semester started, and my fiance lived in my home city. We'd been dating long distance while I was in school. We'd done some of the wedding planning while I was still in school, but we had 5 months to do, like, the bulk of it after I graduated and moved back home. My parents gave me a place to live when I got back home, which was really kind of them. I really appreciated it, and it was lovely living with them, actually. But it was just odd, like, having taken care of myself for so many years, and now, like, finishing post-secondary and being engaged. I just felt really self-conscious about moving back in with my parents. But I wanted to wait until Addie and I were married to live together, and there were only 5 months in between me coming back home and us getting married, which just was not long enough to make it worth, like, finding my own place, moving all my stuff in there, only to just move it out a few months later. But I did spend most of my days at the apartment that I was going to move into, just sort of, like, setting it up with my stuff, decorating it, and so my parents supported me in, like, having a place to sleep, but my fiance supported me in other ways, like paying for the groceries. And it took exactly 0 seconds for this, like, sick feeling of guilt over not having a job and living off of other people to set in. But even though I woke up every day absolutely assaulted with these, like, overwhelming, thorough feelings of guilt, I could not bring myself to apply for jobs right away. And I kept feeling like, what is wrong with me? I've supported myself ever since I moved out. And, I've worked really hard over the last 10 years, so it's not like I don't know how to work. I know how to work. I was just so
like, so down to the marrow in my bones tired. But the thing is, like, everybody is tired. Everyone has been through things, and almost everyone has to work whether they want to or not. But my fiance was so supportive. He didn't even care that I wasn't applying for jobs right away. He was just happy to have me there. I kept asking him, like, are you mad at me? Do you resent me? Like, you're buying the groceries, but I have no success. I am contributing nothing of value. Like, why aren't you mad at me? Why do you still love me even though I'm not working? But he just valued me for being there, just for being me. And I'm like, I don't understand inherent value just because I exist. That feels wrong. Like, for other people, sure, but for me, no, not allowed. And eventually I did apply for a couple journalism jobs, not because I wanted to, only because of the constant overwhelming guilt. I did get one interview, and funny enough, it was the job that my practicum boss and all of my teachers had told me to apply for, and they all told me that I was a shoo-in for it. And I didn't get the job, and I was so grateful that I didn't get it. My fiance and I had long conversations about my future, and it always ended in this. And he would say, like, okay, you have two choices. One is to spend this time working on, like, creative things, being self-directed, taking the time to see what works for you and where your skills fit from, like, an independent standpoint. And the second is to keep applying for jobs that, like, sure, maybe you'll like them, or maybe you just won't hate them. And yes, we'll have more money, but he would always say, like, you'll never get to see, you'll never know what it would have been like to take this time to be creative. And he would tell me that he wanted to see me happy and see me have the time to write what I want to write. And it's crazy because, like, this is my dream. Like, this is the dream. This is what the dream has always been for me since I was very, very young. Like, a stay-at-home creative person with freedom, that's everything. And the crazy part is I see him offering that, and I'm like, oh no, I couldn't possibly, because I'm not worth something that nice. And, sometimes it's just like, just stop thinking, stop being so, like, obsessed with, like, I don't know, being down on yourself, and, like, just take the dream. But over the months, my inability to wield and bend myself into someone looking for a career when necessity is not forcing me to look for a career ended up making that decision for me. I just can't do it. I can't force myself to look for a career when someone is telling me that I don't have to, and that makes me feel weak and dumb and pathetic that I can't force myself to do it, because if I don't have a job, if I don't have success, where does my worth come from? How do I explain myself to other people? What do I say when someone asks me what I do? How do I prove that I have value and that I matter? I spent the time leading up to our wedding stuck in between joy at my freedom and constant self-hatred. I wish I could be the person that I see other people being. I went through what felt like a transformative 2 years of school, and I just kept thinking, why am I still not that person? Why did I not change? I even bought professional clothes. I bought dress pants and nice boots. I really felt like I was playing the part, like I had a bright future, like I was gonna be a great little career woman, and then I left school and I got home and I was like, oh my god, I'm just still me. And my wedding day came, and it was the best day of my life. I woke up super early in the morning, and I just spent a lot of time in prayer just thanking God over and over again. Sometimes I feel like I've been through a lot of suffering or sadness in my life, and I can get into this sort of like self-obsessed loop where I feel like it's so unfair, but it's like ultimately all suffering and pain has made me into the person that Addie wants to marry, and it has also ultimately led me to this day. And, you know, I'm never in a space where I just feel like perfect gratitude. Like, there is always the human part of me that wants to find fault in anything. But that day, I just felt surrounded by this, like, perfect, golden warmth of gratitude. I felt so loved, and my husband and I got to hang out all day with our friends and family, and I had so much fun. And then moving in with Addie, my husband, is the most exciting thing I've ever done. And now that I'm living in just one home, like not, you know, sparsing my time between my parents and the apartment, I'm fully in my new role as both wife and stay-at-home trying to write person, and I feel much better. Like, I feel established.
So much of my fear and self-hatred regarding not having a job was feeling like if I'm not contributing money, I'm not contributing anything of value. But I mean, the reality is there are many ways to contribute. I spent the early days of my return transforming the apartment to a bright, colorful, and cozy home. I worked a lot on our wedding, and I added so many handmade and personal details that would not have existed if I'd been working full-time, because I wouldn't have had the time. And I have found little part-time ventures. It's funny how sometimes when you don't know what to do, if you live by doing whatever seems like the next good thing to do, not something huge or immediately life-changing, but just whatever the thing is that you can do in that present moment, and then if you allow yourself to wait for whatever the other thing is, if you just trust that whatever is meant for you will present itself, or in my case, you maybe 20% trust and 80% get really anxious about it, but the period of waiting does end. Something always shows up. In my case, right now, it's a part-time job working in a foster care home, which is also a small homestead about half an hour outside of the city. They're surrounded by trees and hills and fields, and they have lots of kids and some cows and horses and chickens, which is great because I love chickens. I have always wanted chickens. And it's funny because the thing that I was waiting for was like the journalism question. I was like, okay, what do you want me to do with my life? Like with my writing dreams or whatever. Where does that go? And my questions were answered. I was given something, but even though it has nothing to do with journalism, it did actually answer one of my long-term dreams, which is the chicken dream, not the journalism one, and yet everything still comes together. The other day I wrote a little piece about suffering and shared it with the foster family, like the adults, not the children, and they said really nice things about it and asked if they could send it to their church newsletter, and obviously I'm not getting paid for something in a church newsletter, but like, I don't care. I'm just happy that I wrote something when I felt like writing something, sent it to some people, and it mattered to them. Like, that's all that matters. And other little things present themselves. This summer, a local florist I follow on Instagram and think is super cool was looking for 2 people to help her out with a wedding. So for 2 days, I got to suddenly be a wedding florist, which was super fun and not something I would have had the freedom to do at other points in my life. I have the open option to write the subtitles for my brother's YouTube videos whenever I have the time. Recently, a friend reached out to me asking if I'd be interested in writing a monthly blog post for a beekeeper she knows, so we'll see if that happens, and if it doesn't, it's fine. It's just the point is, like, things present themselves, you know? It just takes time, and the waiting sucks. Like, I've never had a period of waiting where I'm like, yeah, that felt like an appropriate amount of time. Like, it always feels longer than it should, but it's like you're in this gestation period, and it always bears fruit in some way. And even though the fruit that this period of waiting in my life is beginning to bear does not look at all like what I thought it would, I know that if I got a job in journalism, it still wouldn't feel like the work. Like, you know how so much of your life is spent doing stuff that you're always thinking like, oh, if only if I didn't have to do this, I could do this. A career in journalism could never, for me, feel like this is what I am supposed to do. It would still feel like the thing that was in the way of whatever I'm meant to do, and like, it would be work, and it could be good work. I think journalism is important, and I would probably be decent at it, and even among the stress and the depressing stories, I would probably feel proud of what I was doing. I'd have something good and real and tangible to talk about when people ask me what I did. But I just know that to me, it still wouldn't feel like the real work, whatever that is. I would still have these side projects, these side writings. They would feel like the real work, and I know this because it has always been this way. I've never dreamed of having a career, I've just dreamed of having time. And these little side projects, like, I don't think I'm very good at them, and I'm not trying to be down on myself by saying that. I just actually don't think I am. I think I'm worse at them, maybe, than I would be at an average journalism job. But they are what I want to spend time working on because they are what feels good and honest and true to me. And if I keep at them, if I devote time to them, eventually I will get better. And I've had a lot of people insinuate that I'm giving up some sort of gift or path that was meant for me by choosing to reject a career, and I am baffled as to why anyone would think that the system of the professional world is the be-all end-all of where someone could put their gifts or their talents. I am spreading my wings in a million different directions, and they all lead to roads far, far away from LinkedIn. And I know that a lot of these comments from people come from a place of concern. People don't want to see me let go of something that could be good for me or like throw away my path. But sometimes I wonder, like, how much life do I have to live before the people that know me can trust that I know the realities of life and I know the realities of where my heart lies? Ever since I was young, my life has been deeply affected by violent tragedy and intense depths of mental illness and addiction, some of it my own, some of it others. I know how glorious the gift of life is, only because I know how alluring death is. I have longed for death so many times since I was so young, and so it feels like everything to have the life that I currently have. A loving husband, a fuzzy cat, a clean apartment, our little dreams. And I don't mean this in like a, it's the little things way. Like, these are the big things. And these are things that I've seen other people lose, and these are things that people have suffered greatly from losing. And so it seems almost insane to me to need anything else. Why do I have to keep taking? Why do I need worldly success? Is it not enough to live a humble life of working on things that feel true and honest to myself, to try and do my best to live a life of service to others? Why does anything I may have to offer matter less if I'm not making money with it or if fewer people see it? Does the amount that something matters scale upwards with money and the number of eyes on it? Do I matter more if more people see me, or do I just matter, point blank? And you know, I've had many dreams throughout my life, and a lot of them stem from pride and from just wanting attention. But the dream that I think is just like good and doesn't stem from a place of just like wanting to be more than other people, but simply just like wanting to be who I am, is this. It's just this image that I have always had in my head, and it's simple. It's just a room filled with plants and big windows with a bunch of greenery outside, where I have time to sit every day and write, and the sun streams in through the windows, and I maybe have like little light catchers on the wall that make rainbows and shapes on the plants, and that's it. That's the whole dream, but like that has always just been the dream for me. But it was a fantasy more so than a dream, in the same way that like I would dream of being a princess. But like somehow it is coming true. The room does not look exactly like the room that I pictured, but there's a window and the sun streams through it, and I get to sit in there every day and I have time to write. And I'm so grateful for my husband because he is the person that made that possible for me. But I had such a hard time accepting it because for so long there was this voice in the back of my head, and it said like, you have not worked hard enough for this, you have not suffered enough to deserve this, and you are not good enough for this. But thank God the voice is getting a lot quieter now. I haven't even felt it that much over the last few months, and I was thinking the other day how stupid this whole thing is, like how ridiculous it is to have a nice little life, but then just feel constant guilt about it. Like, girl, just enjoy it, please. Be grateful for the gift and move on. But I am. I'm moving on slowly, and moving on from something for me includes talking about it. So that's what this is. So here is the conclusion, which is I spent so many years deciding that I had no worth because of high school. And then I spent a couple years deciding that I had a lot of worth because of post-secondary school. And then I got home, and I didn't get a career job, and decided, once again, that I had no worth. Clearly, this is not the way to do things. I cannot allow my life circumstances to define my worth, because life circumstances always change. My worth is just going to have to be inherent. I'm just going to have to accept that that is true, and it's true for everyone. My husband just keeps loving me no matter what, and I know I love him no matter what. So I'm just going to have to learn to do the same thing for myself. And I don't know exactly how, but I think it goes something like this. Today, I sat at my desk writing. The big window is to my left. It's storming outside. It's a blizzard. I kept pausing to stare out the window, and I think, I wonder what it's like out there. I wonder what it feels like to be out in the blizzard, standing in the swirling snow. I asked my husband, who was working from home today, if he'd like a fancy coffee. I got all bundled up and went into the snowstorm. No one stopped me. I was just allowed to go. And it was brilliant out there. It was blinding and white and sharp. It was like the world with the brightness turned all the way up. I did a walk around the block just to get a feel for it. When I headed to the coffee shop, there was a sign in the door saying they were closed because of the storm. Makes sense, I thought. I can't even see across the street. I headed to the next nearest coffee shop, excited to have a reason to walk for longer, It's a place sort of tucked in into the corner of a dead-end street, and when I stepped in, I was the only customer in there. I relaxed. I love an empty space. I placed my order with a soft-spoken couple that runs the shop. It's always just the two of them. I've been here a few times before, and I've heard them talking with friends who come in and ask them how they're doing. It's good, they'll say. Slow, but good. And we're happy to be here. It's our dream. I think about that as they prepare my coffee. They're making me a fresh pot, so I have time to look around. I know what it's like to have a dream to own a coffee shop. I know what it's like to feel that dream coming true. I know what it's like to watch someone come into your shop on a snowy day to order a hot drink, and I know what it's like to feel so happy that you've created this warm space for people to escape the cold. My old cafe pops into my thoughts constantly, but I always dismiss it. I don't ever let myself really think about it to think back to the dream of it. But in this quiet little place with piano music playing over the speakers, I remember the dream. I look at the couple and think, I know what your dream feels like. I walk over to the paintings on the wall. A lot of them are scenes of wide open skies and rolling fields. They remind me so strongly of my own memories that my heart starts bursting open. I try and decide which one I'd like to ask Addie if we can buy. I go and stand by the glass front door, watching the snowstorm outside, and suddenly I remember something it feels silly that I forgot. I used to work here. It was a different business then. It was a local bread bakery when I was here, and that was years ago. One of my best friends worked with me, and I have a picture of her standing in front of the store, watching the rainstorm outside. A rainbow came out as she watched. And it's only standing at this door, exactly where she was, but many years later, watching the snow and living what feels like a completely different life, that I remember. I'm glad this place is someone else's dream now. I'm glad that because I am living my dream of writing from home and going out into a blizzard, I'm able to support their dream in a little way. My coffee is ready and I head back into the snow. On my walk home, I think of the paintings I saw and the artist's bio I read. It began with a quote that said, "This is the heart of the voice of silence, that you may know in the stillness that you are not alone, that you matter." The streets are almost empty of cars, the wind is howling, and yet the walk feels quiet. My mind is still. I step into the apartment where, up a few flights of stairs, my dream is waiting for me.